Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir. He's the Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I was just wondering, maybe for new listeners, could you just briefly explain what the Resource Works Society is?
Well, I started Resource Works 4 years ago because we felt that there wasn't enough information for residents of BC to make informed decisions about natural resources. And I mean by that forestry, mining, oil and gas, energy in general, transportation. Not enough information out there. And in some cases, there's misinformation. There's not enough understanding because it's a critical priority that we have the infrastructure, we have the exports, the jobs that come from these activities because they're central to our economy. And so I've been working to do studies and share the information, whether in the writing that we do, the events we hold, that kind of thing. And so far, I'm having a great time.
Stewart, a new report has come out about aquaculture in British Columbia. Can you tell us about it?
Well, yes, just out this week. It turns out that there is quite a bit of growth going on in aquaculture, which in BC, it includes finfish, salmon, Atlantic salmon. That's the biggest sector here in BC. It's a giant industry. There's 25,000 people, according to this report, who are employed in aquaculture across Canada. So quite out of sight because most of these operations are not located in cities, so we don't see them, most of us. But they're out there, and they're adding up to a very significant export trade, which is super important for allowing us to get the revenues to import the things we need to import to live the way we do.
Now, of course, there's always been a lot of controversy about aquaculture on the BC coast, but how bad has the criticism been, and has it damaged the industry? And do chefs around the world still really like BC farm salmon?
Yeah, big export market is the USA. The thing about farm salmon is that when it hits the plate, people like to eat it. And I know everyone's got an opinion, and you'll hear different viewpoints. But when it comes to actually what do consumers do? Well, they like to eat farm salmon. It's consistent. It has wide availability. If you're a chef who's, say, serving the same dish, you want to do it over and over again so it looks the same on the plate for your customers. The thing with farm salmon is it's served up in this uniform way that allows them to do what they do for diners. In terms of the environment, I think we've seen over the years a whole web of regulation, whether it's federal or provincial, that covers the activities, the type of things they do, the ingredients, the medicines in some cases that they have to use. You've seen a widening use of diverse feeds. It's no longer just fish food, fish-based food that they feed to these fish. They're using more chicken and things like that for the protein, which is good because there's been some complaints, hey, too many fish being used to grow these fish. Okay, so the industry's responded. They have done the right thing when it comes to seeking out and then using non-toxic forms of treatments for fish when they have to. So I think the industry probably feels a little bit beaten up when they see the BC Minister of Agriculture take a run at them by seemingly threatening to withhold or not renew their leases. It's very difficult to attract investment, especially high quality, where there's many, I think it's 20 First Nations that have agreements that result in jobs for First Nations in rural areas where it's awfully hard to find a good job. So they're creating good jobs for Indigenous people. All of these other benefits, they're doing so sustainably. It's really a great story. Yes, there's a few people who take issue with it, but I think when you start to look at the details, you read this new report that's come out today, it's easy to find on the web. I think a reasonable person looking at all this would come to the conclusion that this, though everything always needs to be improved, and you can't have a rest easy, it's desirable, and we're lucky to have it as an industry.
Well, out of all the seafood sold in Canada, how much of it is farmed?
Well, I think it's growing. The predominant role of salmon within the aquaculture products is quite striking when you look at this report. I think a lot of people who go to restaurants, if you go to the pub and have a pub meal, it's got salmon, there's a very good chance you're having farmed salmon. I think it's every day. It's no longer so common for people to say, oh, is this wild or is it farmed? Some restaurants, they might have a particular approach to that, but for the most part, most of us are probably having salmon from farm sources pretty commonly.
Now, is it true that farm seafood makes up more than half the total of seafood products in Canada?
Well, I think you have hit the nail on the head. It's significant, but it's not just, we're talking about salmon here because it's such a big thing in BC, but let's not forget there's clams, oysters, mussels, scallops, gooey ducks are farmed. There's rainbow trout, sturgeon, different kinds of salmon like coho and sockeye. You've got all of this that makes its way into stores. So yeah, we're all eating it all the time.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about how important farm seafood is to BC and why you think it has a pretty bright future if the government doesn't do what governments like to do and screw things up?
Well, for anyone who loves to fish for wild salmon, I do. I've been up to the Charlottes to fish up there in Haida Gwaii, and it's one of the great things we get to do who live on the coast. And that is something that we need to exist into the future. I think if we hit the wild stocks too hard as a food fishery, which has been a very significant traditional mainstay in BC, we're putting them at risk. So I think if you're seriously minded about preserving wild salmon, the idea that we can cultivate farm salmon on the coast in very controlled ways, in spite of, some of the critics on the sidelines who don't seem to be up to date on the science we've got, this is a very safe, desirable activity, and it preserves wild salmon because it means, for every farm salmon, there's one wild one that we don't need to catch, and that has a direct impact on the health of wild fisheries. So for that reason alone, to me, it's just such a no-brainer.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, BC has finally been able to do something it hasn't been able to do before, and that is ship liquefied natural gas to China. What's the deal behind this? Is this just a one-off?
No, this is a test. It's true, but I think the Tilbury facility, which Fortis BC, the gas utility, has had since the 1970s to help what they call peak shaving. So there are times when you need to flow that back into the gas system, and they have this big storage facility, probably everyone has seen it. You might not know what it is, but it's quite visible. They've added a second one, a great big one, and this is being used to take natural gas that's piped down from where it's produced into the storage where it's liquefied, and then it can be now put into ships. So this is a symbolic first. It's really important because over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a lot of attempts to get LNG going in BC. We know it's a big market. It's global. It's real. And this evidence that the investment made has paid off, I think is good. You know, it's a relatively small shipment of gas, but it shows that we've proved that not only can it be done, we knew the technology was there, but we've got someone who wants to, and that's in China.
Would China prefer to buy from BC than other countries like Russia because we're so much more reliable when it comes to our geopolitics?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you talk to experts in LNG, you talk to the big companies, and I've done that. I've attended LNG conferences. I've read up on this, talked to a lot of people, and one thing I hear again and again is that the importing countries, China, India, Taiwan, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these countries, they want to get their natural gas from a diversity of reliable sources. They don't want to be reliant on just one company or one country source, and that's because they are just needing to ensure that the energy required to fuel their industries, to allow people to cook the food, to heat their homes, is always going to be there. And if you've just got one supplier, that's going to give you some unease. And so when you have more, and you have countries like Canada where, as you say, we're reliable, we have a reputation, the rule of law exists, you know, that the absence of corruption in our processes is a very high positive, and they actually look for that. And they, of course, want it to be as economical as possible and get the best price, but they want it to be accompanied by something that is consistent with their values, and Canada has that in spades.
Well, I know in Europe they get nervous every winter because they rely on Russian natural gas. The Russians have cut off the Ukrainians a couple of times, you know, showing that they don't care if it's cold in your country. They're willing to let you freeze in the dark if that suits their needs or their wants at a particular time. Canada unlikely to do that?
Well, absolutely unlikely. It's basically inconceivable. And I think look no further than the United States, where the Russians have been interfering in elections. We know that there's talk of how Russian money has been used to supply some of the anti-LNG or anti-resource development noise we've heard in British Columbia. So, you know, a lot of things are not what they appear. I think we have to trust our own senses and make sure we're getting good information that can be verified before, you know, making up our minds. I think the Russians are very deliberate, and they will stop at nothing to create, you know, confusion on things. And when it comes to things like cutting off a country that's reliant on you in the middle of winter, as they did in Europe, that's very scary. And I think you look at the UK right now, in the United Kingdom, they are quite happy to be developing their own natural gas, which they do have there, which they can access through the new technology that we've developed in Canada and the US to drill down and break the shale and release that gas. And so they're working on that, and that too will help them to become self-reliant and not have to worry about Russia. And I'm sure that if we can get LNG off our shores consistently, a place like Britain would be more than happy to have Canadian LNG, especially given our long historic relations with that country.
What is with the bad mouthing of liquefied natural gas just the last couple of years? Before that, it was considered a clean, very affordable fuel source.
Yeah, and it hasn't changed. It still is. I mean, China is looking for LNG for a very specific reason. They need to diversify and lower the carbon impact and also the particulate matter that comes out of what they use today. And so LNG is just such a no-brainer for them. It's totally desirable. It's something we can use too. I think we should be using more of it in our vehicle fleets, and we'll talk about that more later when we look at the Tesla truck. But when it comes to LNG, why this negativity? I think partly it's new, and new things have to be examined. And It's good to have a robust discussion, but I also think there's probably industries that are competing against LNG that have sought to dampen the enthusiasm for it. So people who are looking to get into different kinds of energy have been not averse to helping create or support some of this confusion, and I think it just means that we need to be more wary, and we have to make sure the quality information is out there. And the more people know about LNG, the more confidence they have. That's pretty much a rule I find. And the less they know, the more likely it is that they will say this isn't real. We had people dismissing it as if it was a fantasy. Well, it's not. Clearly not a fantasy. It is a genuine opportunity. So more education, more information.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork will commence later this year. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, Tesla rolled out their semi-trailer tractor the other day. They tell us it'll go like stink. No longer will you be stuck behind a slow-moving semi. This thing can probably go faster than your car. How realistic is this long-haul truck?
Well, I think if you examine the Tesla business, there's a little bit of suspicion on the part of some of the financial analysts as to what their business model is, because they're not returning profits. Every car they build is essentially subsidized, and the trick here by the amazing man behind this, Elon Musk, is seemingly to continue to surprise the public with amazing new things. And I'm certainly not, I'm not uncharmed by the incredible cars that they make. It's an amazing experience, and people who have them love them. You want to talk to anyone who's driving a Tesla, they just rave about how they're not having to buy gasoline. They love the performance. They love the look of them. Everyone loves Teslas, but when it comes to things like semi-trailers, we're talking about a very different thing than a regular car. And in the wake of the release of that showpiece prototype, we're starting to see some of the analysts. And one of the more interesting things here is you need to have a pretty big battery to power something that's not only heavy in itself, but also is going to be hauling a heavy load. And I've seen some estimates out there by informed people who understand the physics involved in these batteries. And it sounds like you need a battery that would cost something like $200,000 in order to power a truck to do that work. Now, it's a very heavy battery, so it's going to have an impact on how much you can carry, because there's a limit to what you're allowed to put on the road, because, if trucks are too heavy, they will bust up our roads. So that's why we've got these gross vehicle weight laws in place. So it means that there's certain limitations. And I think for this concept to prove out, not only does it have to perform well so people enjoy being behind the wheel and save money that way, but also it has to do the thing that trucks do, which is haul a lot of heavy things around.
Also, there's what do you do with the batteries once they're used up? Do we throw the components away, or what happens to them?
Well, that's interesting, because we've got a company right in BC, American Manganese, that is securing patents to recycle what will surely be a major issue in future. So they've submitted a U.S. patent application for lithium-ion batteries to recycle them and recover the cathode materials. And this little company is looking to grow that business.
And Stewart, you have a special event coming up on November 29th. Can you tell us about it?
Well, I've been working on this for a while. If you go to resourceworks.com, the first thing you'll see is information about it, so it's easy to read up on it. But what we're looking at is this idea, we call it naturally resourceful, because what has happened in BC is we have a long past of being the hewers of wood and haulers of water. We cut down trees and ship them. We catch fish, put them in cans and ship them. We dig out the coal and ship that. We do this with LNG now, and we're going to be doing it soon with more crude oil moving to China. We have other minerals and agriculture products. We're really great at that, but that's I think only part of the story. What's happened is that because we have very stringent regulations, and also companies have to compete globally and have to be highly competitive, those two factors, environmental soundness and competitiveness, have allowed to exist in Vancouver especially, but all around BC, a lot of specialized skills and companies. And there's companies, for example, Finger Food Studios, peculiar name maybe, catchy name. They are working in the whole realm of digitization that will do all kinds of things to allow our resource production processes to become more efficient and cleaner, and ultimately, of course, better performance in the marketplace. And so there's probably at least 200 companies that do interesting technology things in this kind of space, whether it's satellites or water filtration and mining. We've developed this incredible base of expertise. And what really saddens me is that we haven't, until now, celebrated this fact. It's just been part of the landscape. And yet, you look at the excitement around clusters on, LED lighting or, areas of medical development. Vancouver's been very good about building excitement about things like that. And it grows the business, and it allows people coming out of school to get into good jobs. But the time is past due to start to celebrate the naturally resourceful companies, and that's what we're doing on the 29th at the Hyatt Regency in Vancouver at a lunch event that anyone can come to. If you go to our website, find out how to get a ticket, and I would welcome seeing anyone there. Any of your listeners, Jim, who come up to me, I'll be there to meet as many people as I can who show up, and we'll talk about this idea. And by the way, we've got some really great guest speakers. Can't list them all probably in the time we've got today. We've got a senior civil servant from Victoria coming over to talk about how the province of British Columbia is leading on this. And then we have some experts we brought in from mining, forestry, and oil and gas to talk about what's happening in those industries. And I'll tell you, it is really exciting stuff.
Stuart, how can people get tickets?
Well, if you go, one way you can do is just simply go to resourceworks.com. The first thing you'll see at the website is the information you need. Or if you use an Eventbrite, that's a ticket buying application. You can find it on the web, and you type in naturally resourceful, those two words, and you go right to our event. So a couple of ways you can do that.
Stuart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim. Always a pleasure.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our very popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.